Welcome to the Anxious Child Podcast, the podcast that helps you best work with anxious kids and teens. Now, here's your host, Stephen Quinlan.
Hey everybody, today on the show we have Valerie Canino, who is an author, an intuitive mom, and a certified life coach. She serves as the bridge for connection between parents and their teens specifically. Today, Valerie talks to us about shifting your perspective as a parent from being a boss to being a guide. It's a great conversation around how just that little shift in your mindset can make a big difference in your connection with your kids, which is especially helpful, obviously, if they are struggling through some mental health issues, like Valerie also details with us in some of her work with her own children. A couple of quick notes. If you are trying to get into the private Facebook group for the Anxious Child podcast, you are probably not having a lot of success right now because Facebook has decided, for reasons unbeknownst to me, that I will no longer be on Facebook. I have no idea what happened with my account, but they have shut it down completely. So I'm not sure what's going on there. If you are having trouble and you're trying to join, just email me directly and we'll get you set up to at least be in the community in some way. And as I've mentioned on some prior episodes, I am working on a alternate method of creating the community anyway, just to sort of be outside of Facebook and Instagram and all of that kind of stuff. So that's where we're at with that. Also, I'm excited to announce that there are going to be some other coaching options that are available to you through me. I'm actually going through making an entirely new website for that right now, which should be up hopefully in about the next month or so. So you've got that to look forward to checking out. So until then, let's enjoy talking with Valerie Canino. Thank you for being here. Really excited to talk to you. And I'd love to hear all about your story, kind of just as a parent and getting into some stuff with anxiety and the teenagers and how the heck do we manage all of that. So I don't know if you want to start maybe at just kind of the beginning of things, take us back to when I think I read something about when your daughter was born, you had this sense of, and I think to some extent, it's natural, our parents go through this like, how am I going to do this? And just feeling really overwhelmed. So maybe start there.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I actually never thought, well, I wouldn't say that I never thought, but I really struggled with the decision of whether I really wanted to have kids to begin with. And I think that was because I was parented in such a way that I was afraid that I would pass that down, that I would kind of model that, and I didn't want to be that kind of parent. And I did a lot of self-discovery work, healing work around that. My parents were, good people, and but my dad was pretty much a boss, and that was
Hmm.
really difficult growing up. But after a lot of self-discovery work and just feeling a lot of stuff, I realized I could do it differently.
Hmm.
And I said, "You know what? I can do this and I can do it differently." And that's where I started thinking, "You know what? Um, I loved kids. I know I'm gonna be a good mom, and I'm just gonna trust the journey and I'm gonna let it unfold." And I just kind of got an intuitive sense that, like, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I've got it.
Hmm.
I've got it, you know? Um,
I think that's another really common fear too of it's like epigenetics and all of that kind of stuff that like you are going to pass down these things that didn't sit well with you or didn't work for you on some level. Of course, the irony is that you sometimes look around and as your parent's voice comes out of your own mouth, like, how did that happen?
yeah, that's really true, and it's so funny, when I have a lot of parents that I coach that have that fear.
Hmm.
I don't wanna do it like my mom or dad, and sometimes they don't know how to do it any differently. They haven't been shown how to do it differently
Hmm.
and can do it differently. It's
Hmm.
just I really feel it's having that awareness that you can do it differently and
Hmm.
being mindful of what type of parent do you really wanna be.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
really it's really it's really important to say, "What type of parent do I wanna be, and what does that look like?"
Hmm. Hmm. So that's how you were maybe kind of able to quell some of that initial fear that you were having, was just to look at what you wanted to do and have that sense of, you know what, I can do this in a way that I want to do that, to do it. But it sounds like a lot of that initial work perhaps is getting really clear on what it is that, what kind of a parent you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's key, and that was key for me, really asking the question to myself, what kind of parent do I wanna be?
Mm. Mhm.
And I really started to unpack that for myself. What does that look like? What did I experience in my childhood that I wanna, that I don't wanna pass down or I wanna do differently? And so I phrase it, I was raised like by bosses, particularly my dad, and that was the way he was raised.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do it differently. And so I just organically came up with, kind of like my own parenting plan in my head. And I really call it like parenting like a guide.
Mhm.
So I realized I could parent like a guide and not a boss. And and that's how actually parenting like a guide for me created this unbelievable connection with both my kids,
Mhm.
even in their teen years,
Mhm.
where a lot of parents, feel disconnected with their kids. I had that's really strong connection.
Mhm.
And a lot of it's interesting. So, a lot of parents and close friends were like, "Oh my, how did you do that? Like, how do you? Is it luck? Is it magic?" It had nothing to do with luck or magic. It had to do with the parenting style I created, so I could have that special connection with them.
Mhm. Mhm. I wonder, we're talking about sort of generational differences. You look at your parents and their
Hmm.
parents and sort of going on back down the line. It seems like there's been a progression of some of what you're talking about in terms of less, the child shall be seen and not heard, or, spare
Hmm.
the rod, spoil the child type parenting, to more of what you're talking about, which one of the things I liked, I mean, I love that, just sort of, it's an easy thing to remember, the mantra almost, of that you're the guide and you're not the boss. I love also a lot of what you talk about is emphasizing the connection between you and your child and how that's of paramount importance. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, I connection is extremely important, especially for teens. They really need that connection to their parents to guide them. It's just key today and paramount to really foster that connection, create that connection. It's just paramount, especially to their success,
Mm.
on all levels, on all levels, and really creating that safe place for them to come home. I call it like for in my house, it's a non-judgment zone. So when my kids come home, it's like a non-judgment zone. I create a safe place because they go out into the world and they have so many things coming at them. They really need a place to reboot. So like that's a big thing I tell parents is like it's so important to create that safe space for them to come home to reboot so they can go back out into the world, and feel some semblance of stability. Extremely, extremely important.
Yeah. I'm curious how you feel like the pandemic has affected some of this, because what you have on the other side of that is sort of the opposite of what we're talking about, in that everyone's there. In
Mhm.
sometimes that, I feel like I've seen this a little bit kind of in my own life with my kids, and also, with other families, that it can quickly go from being that safe place that you describe to being almost like a pressure cooker of family dynamics and issues and things like that. How have things shifted for you a little bit in terms of how you are approaching that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, actually, I had a lot of parents come to me in the pandemic because there was conflict. I
Hmm.
mean, just being in, close quarters, pretty much 24/7 with each other created a lot of conflict and parents were triggered like 24/7. So, I mean, I shared with my parents that it is actually an opportunity, to really look at the family dynamic, and create a new one of harmony. So I actually took those situations that they experienced, and we would unpack it and say, okay, how do we create harmony in the home? Because everyone's going at each other. And it was really about communication.
Mm.
A lot of parents that I coached and the families, because I would meet separately with the parents, and then I would meet separately with the teens, and then we would come together. And, we'd start with, okay, what's the vision for the family? Like, you know, how do you want to feel together? What kind of relationship do you want to have? And it's always the same. We all want to get along. We want to have mutual respect. We want to be heard. Being heard is really big. And so then it's about coming up with a plan for the family and then supporting them to implement the plan. So you can always come up with a plan, but the other side is implementing it.
Mm.
And a lot of it I found was the best thing is sometimes just to walk away and take a mindful moment,
Mm-hmm.
and then come back to the communication.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're having a conflict, in the heat of the moment, they're not responding, they're reacting. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, part of creating that peaceful dynamic is learning how to respond and not react. But, a lot of us don't have those skills, to be honest with you.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no manual that says, okay, well, there are books out there, but, we don't come with a parenting manual. They don't come with a child manual.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to figure it out as we go along. So it's starting with the vision, and then it's starting with the plan, and then it's starting with supporting the family with that plan.
Mm.
You know,
It reminds me of, I have told parents before, to the idea of putting your kid in a timeout. This is obviously when they're younger, but to put yourself in a timeout instead, because you obviously have control over your own body much more so than somebody else's. So, so that you're not getting in some kind of a wrestling match with your 5-year-old and being like, you will stay in this room. And
yeah.
you're giving yourself that second, which is what you, or minute or whatever it is, which is what you really need to kind of recalibrate yourself, take a few breaths, whatever it is you need to do. And then on top of that, you're modeling that behavior for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's the most powerful thing that you said. Is I tell parents the same thing. It's so funny because parents are like, well, why do I have to take a minute? Why do I have to take a minute?
They're the one being a jerk.
I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, I've heard it all. You don't have to take a minute, but if you don't take a minute, what's going to happen? And so almost always they're like, well, there's going to be a big argument. And when they realize the payoff of taking that minute is greater, then they're more apt to like buy in. Okay, I'll take a minute. And then also, just like you said, I think that's key, is like for them to know, hey, listen, if you do that, that's modeling. They're watching you, because kids watch everything, I tell parents.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when they see you do it, then they're more apt to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big proponent of modeling,
Yeah. And it's so much of the work of being a parent is, working on yourself, right? Like there's, I think sometimes this idea of like, well, we've got to take Junior and like whip him into shape here, as opposed to turning that, mirror on yourself and being like, what can I do differently? And how can I approach this situation? You were talking about a lot of people don't necessarily have those skills, and it's no, sort of rip on them. It's just that they haven't necessarily been put in a situation, thrown into the fire, where you really have to pull some of those skills to the forefront. So learning about things like being aware of how you're feeling in a particular situation, and then having the wherewithal to kind of do something about it, give yourself a break or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, think about it. If if your parent yelled at you 20, like all the time,
Mhm.
that's how they communicated, yelled, yelled, yelled. Do you really know anything different?
Mm. Right.
And so it's that awareness of saying, okay, my parent yelled 24/7. I don't want to yell at my kid 24/7. I want to do it differently. How can I do it differently?
Mm.
You know?
It feels like you're really harnessing that somewhat innate desire that I think people have to be different than their parents in some way, like that kind of
Yeah.
starts even in those teenage years of developmentally breaking away from your parents and finding out who you are. And so everything that your parents do sucks, obviously, because it's theirs. And uh it's like I feel like you're like latched on to sort of the power of that and encourage people to like find their own voice or style or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think it's important that see, I'm not a one size fits all person. I mean,
Yeah.
there's different, I feel everyone has their own different parenting style, and it's just really about figuring out that style for you that brings that connection, authenticity to the relationship,
Mm. Hmm.
and I mean, that's my goal as a coach, parenting team coach. That's what I do. And I also, a big thing is really creating that safe space to listen with compassion to the parents and the teens and their struggles, you know, to figure out, how we can shift from, A to Z. Really, really super important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to, as a society, beat ourselves up. And I just feel like that serves no purpose. I've seen so many parents and teens are just really, really hard on themselves. And I really think it's a time to shift into self compassion,
Mm.
which helps us become aware and then helps us change.
That's a great point. There's so much of that that's prevalent these days, and you hear a lot about self-esteem issues and where is that coming from. And it's a lot of just quick judgment, I think, that happens in the sort of the fast-paced culture that we have. You're one of these, you're one of those, you did that, you did this. It's almost like that sort of cancel culture that's out there now, right? Like you've done that thing, so that's it. Like whoosh, we're done with you, you're gone. Do you have a sense as to how anxiety might play into all of this? And are there ways that you work specifically with teens and their parents who might be having some either just generalized anxiety or something specific?
Yeah, anxiety is just increased, especially since the pandemic. I feel it's really skyrocketing, actually. So, depending, I mean, it depends. Sometimes I work with the parent and the teen. Sometimes I work with the teen, but the parent. So the first thing is, like I said before, is I create that space to listen compassionately. And for some teens, they really need to be listened to. And so just kind of emptying out and creating that safe space for them, just that I find that that decreases
Mm,
their level of anxiety. Just being able to have someone to talk to, because a lot of the teens that I coach, they don't feel they can talk to their parents, or they don't feel that they have that other adult or person in their life, friend that they can really just connect to and talk to. And
mm,
I think that's really key and important. The next thing is, I look at the trigger of the anxiety. What does that look like? And how does that manifest? Some kids, they worry, they're in their head a lot.
mhm,
Sometimes it's a physical thing. They bite their nails, they play with their hair a lot, or,
mhm,
I mean, there's different ways that manifest. So I look at the trigger. What is the trigger? A lot of the times I find with teens, it's they have a problem, they don't know what to do about it, and they completely feel stuck.
mm,
That's a biggie. Sometimes it's all about the unknown.
mhm,
I have no idea how this is going to turn out. And then they go right to, oh my God, what if? And they go
mhm,
into the negative side. And then there's a big thing is I find that anxiety is linked to expectation,
mm,
unrealistic expectations, especially with school.
mhm,
And so I kind of look at that, and that's where we start. What does it look like? And so, there's different ways I approach it. For instance, with some of my teens, after we go through it and I listen and I figure it out, I start with, I might start with making the unfamiliar familiar.
mhm,
And so I'll give you an example. So I was coaching a teen a few weeks ago, 13-year-old girl, and her mom signed her up for tennis lessons. Thought it would be good for socializing, a new thing for her. And so we got into the session, and she was just like, I don't want to go. She's like, I don't want to go.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, why? She's like, well, I have no idea, what's going to happen. I don't know who who the coach is going to be.
Mhm.
I don't know what to wear. I don't know how long the session is. I don't even know how to talk to these kids. And I was like, okay, so that's the unfamiliar. And I said, okay, well, what if you knew who the coach was? Okay. What time it was, knew exactly what to wear, and you felt comfortable talking to the other people on the team.
Mhm.
How do you feel now? I feel good. I feel good. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's make that happen. So we, what I did was I really don't, I don't really tell my teens or my parents what to do. I coached and empower them to figure out what to do because
Mhm.
that's really the big power. And so we sat down and I'm like, okay, so what do you think you could do to make that happen? And all
Mhm.
of a sudden she's like, well, I could look on the website.
Mhm.
Oh, great. So she looked on the website. Oh, then she saw the write up on the two coaches. Then she figured out what time. Then she's like, oh, I can email the coach and ask if I can wear sweats instead of maybe shorts because that's where I feel comfortable. Got an email back saying, sure, no problem. Then we role played. Okay.
Mhm.
About communication, socialization. So what that looked like. So hi, how are you? How would you respond in this situation? And by the time that session was over, she just felt so comfortable. And I could see her body relax. I could hear her voice just steady and calm. And she was ready for that experience.
Mhm.
And then the next time, after after that session and we met again, she said she had the best experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
What I also do too with my teens is we visualize. I'm a really big proponent of using the imagination to change the subconscious, to create the experience you want to have. And that's pretty powerful because, the subconscious doesn't know the difference between imagination and real. And so that's a big tool for my teens. If they can visualize it working out okay, then they're more apt to think, okay, it's going to be okay.
Mm.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love both those examples. I was thinking as you were talking about, this person who was going to the tennis lessons and feeling so unsure about all of those things. I think it's as a teenager and particularly, that's probably even more significant because you're at this place in your life where it's like you're not sure about yourself at all. And all you want to do is be able to fit into some kind of something. And if you don't know what the clothes are to wear or who it is you're going to be talking to, that's a disaster. And so I almost feel like it's like the anxiety, which might be there anyway, is kind of ratcheted up several notches just because of where you are in your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree. And for me, it's really about helping that teen understand that they can always, I always call it like they can always write a new story for themselves.
Mm. Mhm.
That's powerful when they understand that they do have some semblance of control over their life because a lot of times they feel out of control.
Mhm.
And I always coach teens to know that they can always do something
Mm.
within their control to change their circumstances.
Mhm.
For example, what if, you go to the lunch table and you're not sure if your friends are going to have a space for you at the table? That's a big one, you know?
It's like the nightmare scenario, right? You turn
Yeah.
around with your lunch and you're like, now what do I do?
Yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
I've had scenarios where the kids actually see their friend coming and they close the space.
Mm. Mhm.
I mean, what do you do in that situation? There's panic. I mean,
Mhm.
their heart beats really fast. They're stuck, but what if they knew they could do something else in that situation? What if they take a minute, go to the bathroom and just kind of like just regroup, have a moment to just, okay, regroup and say, okay, what can I do?
Mhm.
I had this scenario come up with a teen. She was like, I don't know what to do. I think my friends are going to do this again. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about, different scenarios in that situation. And I said, "Well, are there any other activities or anything else or any other tables you can sit at? What do you?" And she said, "Well, Mrs. X, she has this quiz game at lunch with these kids. Some of my friends are in it, and she does it at lunch, and you can sit there." And I said, "Okay." And I'm like, "Well," she's like, "Well, maybe I can give that a try." And I'm like, "Well, maybe you can." And she did.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up loving it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what she did for the rest of the school year. So it's empowering them to know that they have some semblance of control. And I help them, solve the problem. It's all about solving the problem for them.
Yeah, and giving them options, I think, too, is a lot of what you're saying. Like that there's that way out of, which is, of course, what helps with sort of panic attacks in general, right? Is that you feel like there's no way out of this. I'm stuck here, which is actually why a lot of panic attacks happen in the car,
Hmm.
because you're in this metal box and you think that you're like, what am I going to do? And of course, you can always pull the car over and open up the door. But that sense of I'm stuck, there's no way out. What do I do? As soon as there's even a option, that starts to dwindle a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that I think there's a lot of what you're saying in combination with I love the visualizing that you were talking about as well. Because I think that kind of also ties into the parenting, like we were talking about earlier. What kind of a parent do I want to be? How do I visualize myself being with my children? What kind of things are we doing? How am I acting? Like, what does that look like? And it sounds kind of simplistic, but until you have actually done that and gotten, again, really clear on it, you don't have that as a goal.
Oh, I think that's really true. I kind of feel like, as parents, we just think like we wing it. That's
Yeah,
that's what our parents did, right? I mean,
sure.
just but when you really become mindful and aware and making, like you said, a goal, like, okay, what kind of parent do I want to be and what's the goal here? I mean, that just up levels everything,
Yeah.
you know.
What do people say? I'm curious when you say that, like, so what, like, when you say, what kind of a parent do you want to be? Is there a stock answer or what does that look like?
Well, first there's a lot of silence. I
Uh-huh.
mean, because people don't really think about it. It's just all parents that I talk to, the big thing is, "I wanna be a good parent."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, well,
That's
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
broad. Yeah.
yeah." And so what does that really look like? And
Hmm.
good, bad, I'm not into those labels.
Hmm.
Let's unpack that and, you know, let's look at what that is for you.
Uh-huh.
The thing is like, what kind of relationship do you wanna have with your kid? And I wanna have a close relationship, I wanna have authentic relationship, I want them to thrive,
Mhm.
I mean, so what does that look like for you? What kind of relationship do you wanna have? Okay, and so let's talk about how you do that.
Mhm.
And the one big thing is communication is key.
Mhm.
How you respond, learning how to respond and not react is key. And a lot of it, like you said before, is really the parent working on themselves,
Mhm.
doing the work themselves
Yeah.
is really key.
I was curious your thoughts, speaking of that, around parental anxiety and how that plays into the situation with their kids. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, actually, I find that a lot of kids that have anxiety, their parents have anxiety.
Yep.
And so parental anxiety is around, I find not just the worries around their kids, but the worries around their own life. They've got a lot going on in their own
Mm.
life that they're unsure of.
Mhm.
And again, it's really creating that safe space to listen with compassion and figure out how I can support that parent with that anxiety.
Mhm.
And I find a lot of parents with anxiety are in their head a lot,
Mhm.
going to the worst scenario. And sometimes it's about finding the evidence that it's not going to be the worst scenario,
Mhm.
evidence that it can be different. It is different is key to helping them.
So like facts as opposed to what you feel like emotionally is going to happen or whatever, really looking at kind of what's right in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Being in the present moment and looking at really what's going on
Mm.
And then seeing like, okay, well, what if something else happened
Hmm.
and what if it could be better?
Yeah.
I like to take the what if scenario and unpack it on the positive side instead of the negative side.
Uh-huh.
Because we tend to unpack it on the negative side. That's just human nature. There's research about it.
Yep.
But let's, and I take the what I move the dial from the what if negative to the what if positive,
Mm-hmm.
and that can really shift their mindset.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we do have that sort of hardwired negative bias, which people very quickly go to. But you're right. I think we kind of gloss over that or poo poo, put that off to the side, that there's this possibility of that things could be really great. I'm thinking about what you were saying earlier too around responding versus reacting. And that I think has in it inherently that quality of pause and awareness and kind of like a lot of the things that we've been talking about. You just sort of are taking that second so that it's not a reflexive reaction, but it's more like something that has been taken in, maybe kind of chewed on a little bit, and then the response comes out of that.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And so what I tell parents is it can be hard to do, but really if you get this one thing, it can change the dynamic of your relationship is to don't listen to the words.
Mm,
Listen to what the emotion is
mhm.
and what that emotion is telling you. And so it tends to if parents can do that, then they can step back and become more neutral
Mhm.
because then they're less triggered. And
And
we
maybe
have
just
to, yeah.
I was gonna say, and maybe don't take it personally as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to yes,
Yeah.
so that's exactly true, like, don't take it personally, and so that's how I help them not take it personally is like, "Okay, your kid just, said something mean to you,
Right.
okay, don't let right, look so what's the emotion behind that? They're angry,
Mhm.
they're sad, they're frustrated, okay, work with that emotion. What is that telling you? What is their frustration? What is their anger telling you? What kind of support do they need?"
Yeah, and it's not always about you. Like I maybe one of the byproducts even of creating this stable, supportive place, everything that you were talking about all the stuff that you try to have your house be is that you're giving them that space to feel frustrated, to feel angry, to feel maybe a lot of these negative emotions that come out. And of course, you're also there. So you may be catching some of that sort of at the same time. So it may feel not great kind of in the moment, or you're like, what did I didn't, and this, I'm sure any parent of a teenager gets this feeling of like, well, what did I do? Like,
Right.
did I, did I offend you somehow? Or what was that, but actually what you may have done is just given them the space to express whatever it was that was going on for them.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. So that's really what is going on. And so if they can learn not to take it personally and just step back and say, okay, what is really going on?
Mm,
And how can I support them in this moment? Then it's a game changer.
mm,
It's a game changer. And then you'll find that they'll start to relax. They'll start to open up, especially if you provide a non-judgment zone. And what I mean by a non-judgment zone, that starts with like just letting them empty out and you don't say a word. You don't give any advice. You don't say a word and you just let them finish and, then ask, wow, empathize with them. Wow, that sounds really tough. You are really frustrated. I hear you're really frustrated. Is there anything I can do to help you?
mm.
And don't
That's
say anything.
yeah, that's right. Just keep your
Don't
mouth
say
shut.
anything.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
don't say
Yeah.
anything. And then give it a moment.
Uh-huh.
And then most likely they'll just say, well, such and such happened.
Uh-huh.
And then the next thing is don't tell them what they should do. Don't lecture,
Uh-huh.
but just really give them the space to open up and help them solve the problem if they're in a place to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that goes very nicely with what you were saying about looking for the emotion in whatever it is that they're saying. So all the words are kind of coming at you, and you're like behind your umbrella or whatever it is, sort of
Right.
cowering, and it's sort of washing over you. And all you're doing that whole time is being like, what is the feeling that's associated with this, so that I can empathetically reflect that back to them and say, like, I get it, I hear where, where that's coming from for you. And then you don't necessarily have to spoon feed them what it is that they're going to do with it, but you just sort of help them come up with their own solution, which of course, like we were talking about earlier with the where they are developmentally, whatever it is they come up with is going to be way better than when you come up with, even if it's the same thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I because I feel that really helps kids develop their own autonomy to make good decisions,
Yeah.
I mean, I know, the I've kids have a lot of wisdom. They
Yeah.
really, really do. They just need to have the chance to share it,
Mm.
and so it's really super important.
And what does that do for their self-esteem, right? That they're the ones that have come up with this.
Oh, they beam.
Yeah.
They beam. I just coached a teen last week, and she was having, her and her mom were getting into conflict because she wasn't doing her chores on time, and it was a big thing, and all of a sudden she was like, "Wow, what if I come up with this great plan?" And so I supported her to come up with this doable, it's gotta be doable,
Yeah. Mhm.
doable plan so that her mom wouldn't have to remind her to do her chores, and bingo, the next week she's like, "This is working out really great." And she's like, "I'm so happy, like, I can do this, and my mom's happy, and I'm happy, and this is fantastic."
Mm,
I mean, it's just amazing to see their faces light up and just they feel so good about themselves
mm.
when they're able to contribute to solving something for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. And the knowledge that they did that. They're
Mhm.
the ones that came up with that, and they have ownership over it. Yeah, I love it. Is there anything that you would like to say to parents who might be listening about, like, what kind of a takeaway message would you want them to have? What do you feel like is kind of most important out of all the things we've been talking about? Although we've talked about a lot of stuff, so
Yeah.
there's a lot. But like,
Yeah.
what do you want people to feel or to really kind of take with them?
I just well, I think we really talked about a lot of important things, but I really loved how we emphasize that, having a parenting vision is really super important for
Having a
s
parenting
yeah.
division.
No, oh, no, division,
Sorry.
no.
I was like, "Wait a minute."
Oh, no,
Or I
division.
thought it was like, or
That's the
like
opposite.
some subsection of like, over here we have our parenting division where
Oh my god, that's so funny. I meant, um, parenting vision. I meant
vision. There we go.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, having a parenting vision, just like, when you have a goal for yourself, okay, I wanna have this type of job, or I
Mm,
wanna make that amount of money, or, I mean, whatever goal, having that vision for
mm,
parenting and always coming back is, are my actions, in alignment with this vision? And if not, then, change it.
mm.
Change it.
Yeah, it makes me think of like vision boards or something. They're kind of big now, right? Like you put
Oh,
all the
yeah.
stuff up there on it, all those things you were saying. How do I want my life to look? What do I want to achieve? Like all that stuff. And any kind of motivational speaker or somebody in that sort of line of work will tell you, like, if you don't have that, like you're just spinning your wheels and you're not really progressing towards anything. Yet, as we were saying earlier, with parenting, there's this sense that you're just kind of like, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And another big thing is, I really want parents to know they can reset. They can
Mm,
always reset in the moment.
mhm,
That's huge. I mean, we can't go back to the past, but we can always change the future. So
mm,
I always say start from today.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love that. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with all of this stuff and feel like, oh, how bad have I screwed up my kids, or what have I done with this or that and the other thing? But you always do have that reset button that's available to you, and just staying with kind of where you are right in that particular moment.
Yeah.
Uh, that's what you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just the moment you have.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I agree. I feel like we covered a lot of really important stuff, and I hope that that's helpful to some folks out there. And I really love the work that you're doing and teaching people to just sort of almost like shepherd their children along as opposed to prodding them or something. So I think it's really valuable and definitely appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here.
All right, that was Valerie Canino. Her website is valeriecanino.com. You can also check out while you're there her Mission Attainable program, which helps to foster connection between teens and parents. She also has services there for parents, families, for moms, and for tweens, teens, and young adults. So that is it for today. As always, be well and be in touch.
This podcast is not intended as medical or psychological treatment. In no way should it replace treatment from a mental health professional.